anyways, yeah, if you see a big black box, that's me moving around the chat pod. I'm trying to keep that open so I can see people joining. I'll get rid of it here in a little bit, and also so I can mute folks from my computer. Where was I on this? So we'll publish this also on the page, the one that's out there again. While it's still relevant, there's a variety of things that are new in this version compared to the one that's out there now. I do want to say, if you find this helpful, or if you figured other folks in your organization could benefit from joining this, please spread the word. Anyone at all in your organization can join this, and in fact, if they want to join mid-session, let's say there's a particular topic, and you're like, well, I'd like to at least them to come and hear this part. We try and stay on schedule, so if you want them to join, say, hey, I really like you to join and hear this stuff about our IT stuff that Mike and Kareem go over. They can just join us for a particular part if they want. Also, I want everybody to know that we are working on a more broad and more in-depth provider orientation. Ben Orner and his team are taking the lead in that area, and basically this might end up being basically absorbed into that once we get it up and rolling. The goal is to have a more broad orientation for service folks and in our different service lines that are more nuanced. If you're a residential provider versus an early intervention provider versus a case management company and so forth. So as that gets finalized, we'll be introducing that and rolling that out, and I think the goal is to get something like that done in the next 6 months maybe. So be on the lookout for that. Also, this session is scheduled from 9 to noon. We will take a break at about 10:35 for a coffee or potty break, and we'll join back at 10:45. Okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get this black box out of the way. You can see here our agenda for the day. All of you should have this. First thing I'm going to do is go over some communication improvements, and I probably should just basically change the title of this at this point, because this is almost going on a year and a half now that these are improvements. They're basically what we've done, since I've been here. We've really tried to improve our turnaround time and communication with providers, and I think we've achieved that. I'm very proud of my team, as well as others in the organization that aren't on my team, for how we're responding to providers now. I felt like there was a period of time there where really people couldn't get answers, and so I think we've done a good job of addressing that as an agency. I do want to kind of let you know we do have some shared mailboxes. We have 4 of them, and unfortunately people are still not using them the way I have requested. The reason we need them is so that we can track and be on we're a team, and so if communications or issues are existing in silos, we either have to think to forward an email to someone or copy them on something if we're replying and they're not on the initial email. It really doesn't help with our communication when we're siloed. So we're asking people to continue to use these shared mailboxes. You can see here under number 3 what those are and when you would use them. And then we are providing some key email contacts for you if you do need to reach out one-on-one. Again, not everything you ask is really a generic and fits within one of those 4 mailboxes. There are times you'll need to ask a specific question related to your organization that needs to go to an individual person, like, LaKenya, what is this payment for that I got the 18th for $258? So that's an example. Also, we have TheraP SCOM for you to do encrypted communications with us. Again, if you have your own tool, that's fine. One of the difficulties we have is when you send, let's say you do have a process you use at your end, and you email us to one of our shared mailboxes, we now have to somehow share the password we set up. If your encrypted email, we have to log into it. So that does pose a little bit of a problem. The other, we're going to get into some IT issues later, so this is going to be a little bit redundant, but just to ensure we cover it. If you need to send us something encrypted, you can always ask us to email you an encrypted email, and we can email you and you can respond to us, and the entire communication will be encrypted. So we're not sending PHI, protected health information, in an insecure manner or unsecure manner. But TheraP SCOM is out there, and you can use it. I personally don't. I try and stay away from it because I find that people are using it when there's no PHI. They just do it out of convenience, and it's not convenient for us really, because I'm never in TheraP. SPM, that's our never can remember what service provider manual module, or yeah, it's really critical that you manage that your membership in that module properly in those channels, because that's how we send out our notifications and our emails to people. If you're not in the right channels, you're going to miss out on communication. We just go in there on our side and we say generate an email list from this channel. We copy and paste the emails in. We don't even look at who's on them generally. We're just relying that if you're a CFO, that you're in the CFO channel. So you'll see a black box again. I need to mute somebody. Angela, unless you're able to do that. I don't know if you can. Somebody on the phone just called in. All right, I got it. So make sure you're in the right channel. You can be in multiple channels. You know, if you're like, well, I really want to make sure I get what my ED gets, because sometimes they don't pass it on, and I need to be aware of those things. You're allowed to sign yourself up or have your person that does that in your organization put you in multiple channels. So please double check that. We've got some instructions in here that they'll go over later on how to get that done. Our finance and audit resources page on our website is very, very helpful. I really recommend that you set that as a favorite and visit it frequently. We put all kinds of useful information on there. It really helps you find what you need and not have to figure out how to find it all over our website or business tools or YouTube or what have you. So please frequent that page. Also suggest things that you would like added to that page. If you find, man, it sure would be helpful if they had that on there, just let us know. You can email one of our shared mailboxes or email me directly if you would like. We have all of our executive memos on our website, so you can go out and look at those. They're separated into major categories, but then there's all memos section as well, where you can go find those. We implemented DocuSign so that we didn't have all these contracts floating all around in the mail, which I think has been a huge improvement. Really improves communication and efficiency. We also have our YouTube channel, so if you're not familiar with it, go out and check it out. It's got all of our commission meetings on it, our finance and audit committee, our policy committees, our finance work groups. This training will probably be out there. There's a good bit of information. Also, there's a good FOIA presentation out there if you need a Freedom of Information training for your board. That's out there as well. So frequent the YouTube channel, and of course we do meetings like this where folks don't have to travel, which I think has been a big improvement. We were doing a lot of this before COVID, but we still had a lot of folks attending in person, which I would like at some point we get back to that. But anyways, that has been a communication improvement in my opinion. We've provided with you a list of all of our directives. This is also on our finance and audit page and on our directives section of our website. You might want to have this handy so you have a nice list of all the directives we have. Also, I'm going to go over Medicaid cost reports real quick. This is not a Medicaid cost report training. This is a very high level introduction to cost reports. We just need to make sure that, especially this is a fiscal training, so I know not everybody on here is fiscal, and if you're a private provider, you don't have a requirement to submit a cost report at this time. We are researching whether that is really the way it should be done. We also are researching kind of how this will look in fee-for-service for our DSM boards. There's some uncertainty on this side in regards to where we're headed in regards to cost reports, but at the current time, if you're a private provider, you don't have to submit a cost report, so you can turn your ears off if you want on this. If you're a DSM board, though, you do have a cost report requirement. It's required to be submitted by September 30th, and that's because we have to receive all provider cost reports and accumulate our cost report to file ours with the state by November 30th. So that only gives us 2 months to do all of our where's all that noise coming from? It's all right. Quality assurance and validation on our end. So even though the audits are due October 31st, we have to have those cost reports done by the 30th of September. So my personal experience has been that people have their final numbers by September 30. That used to be our date to file your audits by, but we bumped it back by 30 days, 31, I guess, technically. So again, my experience is that most auditors and most providers have their final numbers well before September 30th, and cost reports can be done. You can request an extension, and that would come to me if you do need an extension. So that is an option. We just need to make sure that we don't get bombarded with people needing an extension, because we can't work on 40 cost reports at one time, but we certainly can't have 35 on extension either. So there is needing a process there. The cost reports must be prepared using the final audited figures and must be on a full accrual accounting versus modified accrual. So in other words, you're not going to use your governmental funds accounting, which includes, for example, if you bought a $100,000 building, it would be in your expenditures on modified accrual, but in full accrual, you only claim your depreciation. So it has to be full accrual, and of course your auditor understands all those terms if you don't, but just so you know that is the proper usage of the starting numbers for that. And then as you fill out your cost reports, if there's any difference, let's say you fill out your cost report and you turn in by the 30th, and then you go and do your audit report by the October 31st deadline, and you realize, oh my God, we had to make another entry. The cost report we turned in is not going to match my audit. There's a requirement in the directive that you put a schedule in the audit to explain what that difference is to us. You have to turn in the cost report and all attachments and supporting schedules. We're getting lots of cost reports here without these attachments or the wrong attachments. So there's a checklist on our finance and audit page, and when we do our audit directive this year, when we revise it, we're going to actually probably add the cost report information into the audit directive so that there's clear guidance on how that should be done, when they're due, and so forth, because at this point there really is nothing but a memo issued from us that you need to get that done. Currently, we're only accepting hard copies of the cost reports. You can still turn in an electronic copy if you want, but we need a hard copy as well. Again, the main reason for that is there's just a ton of flipping back and forth, note taking, and so forth that we have to do, and having it on a screen really isn't conducive to that type of work we have to do with those. So we end up having to print them if you hard copy them, email them to us. For your cost reports, you can consolidate any like-kind programs into one schedule. So for example, some providers out there are still issuing a separate schedule for each CTH2. You can consolidate all those on one schedule for CTH2s, but you need to give us a combining schedule or some easy way to see how you derive those numbers from each of the individual homes. Also, cost reports are not required to be prepared by the CPA. A lot of times they are. They're not required to be audited or anything like that. So just want to clarify that in case there's a question. The source for the rules, the Medicaid cost accounting rules, are in HIM 15, or the Provider Reimbursement Manual Part 1. Again, that link is on our finance and audit page. That is where all the rules are that you need to be aware of as you complete these cost reports. Also, even though you do the cost on full accrual basis, there are a variety of adjustments you need to make as listed here and others. Depreciation, you must use the estimated useful lives of depreciable hospital assets, which you need to own that book. You can find it on the internet on Amazon. Again, our link is, I think there's a link on our page for you to navigate to that. Cost reports have to be submitted for each waiver and ICFID that you operate. Also, cost statements for case management and early intervention, because those are Medicaid funded programs. All of our forms that you already use are on the Finance and Audit webpage, and there's a cost report training that actually are in your handouts here that you can download that are in the meeting. For those of y'all just joining, the handouts are in the meeting if you want to pull them. It's like a 6 meg file, I believe. But that training is in there as well, and we hope to hold another training probably here in the next 2 months, again, like we did before. So with that being said, this is the training that I'm gonna flip through real quick and get to Kevin's presentation because he's up now. But you can take your time looking at this training. Again, this is on our Finance and Audit page if you would like to access it there. See, you're on page 42, Kevin. Let me reduce this size. All right. Do you want to come over here and drive, or do you want to sit there and talk and I'll drive?
No, if you don't mind driving, I'll stay
Okay.
here. Good morning, everybody. This is Kevin Jacoby, Director of Internal Audit, DDSN. Welcome. I was sort of surprised when I saw how many people had signed up today. I thought this would sort of start dwindling as we had more and more of these, and I think it's grown. I think we end up having more people every time. Looks like we have a pretty good cross-section of boards and private providers. Again, some of what I'm going to say would be applicable to one and not necessarily the other, but I'll try to point that out as we go through.
There's a lag.
Gotcha.
Slight lag on my side.
Gotcha. All right. So I tell people this is probably the most important document in this handout, and that's how to get in touch with us. Every training we do, I tell people we don't mind questions. I mean that sincerely, because we would much rather have you reach out to us and we discuss it with you up front and spend 5 minutes discussing it, rather than we come out and then we find an issue and we have to write it up and you have to respond to it. It's just much more time efficient if you will communicate with us on the front end. So please don't hesitate to give us a call. So what's the overview of internal audit in terms of if we come out to do an audit, what are your expectations? Well, no, I'm sorry. The next one is sort of scope. Yeah, scope of internal audit. So what do? Well, as our name implies, we do audits. We do have some other functions. Coordination, we work with coordinate with a lot of other state agencies, to include the Vulnerable Adult Unit at SLED, Medicaid Fraud Control Unit at the Attorney General's Office, Program Integrity at Health and Human Services, local law enforcement, the Ombudsman's Office. We also offer technical assistance. Technical assistance differs from an audit in terms of it's much more narrowly defined. It's generally done at the request of somebody, either executive management at a board, sometimes the board of directors at a board, executive management at DDSN. Again, it's more narrowly defined. Typically, when we come out, we look at that one issue, we issue a management letter. We don't, the majority of times we don't require a cap. There are some exceptions. If we come out and we find something that you really need to address, we will ask for a corrective action plan or cap. We also do what we're doing now. We do training. We have consumer funds training, Medicaid fraud training, board training. We've developed training based on human service providers having a conference and asking us to do a training on a specific instance. So if we feel like it's in our wheelhouse, we're happy to try to be able to help you. And then in external audits, we also coordinate with the audit directives, do quality assurance reviews of the report on applying agreed upon procedures. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. So those are just some of the other functions that internal audit does. All right, so now if we come out and do an audit, what's the process that you can expect? So once we decide that we're going to go do an audit, before we even reach out to you, we do some preliminary survey information on our end. If it regards a provider, we're going to look at the size, the funding, incident management, reporting, how many homes you have, how many folks you're serving, what's your funding level. So once we get all that, we will call you and we will come to an entrance conference. At that point, we're going to tell you what we'll be reviewing. We'll also ask if you have anything that you would like for us to look at, and I encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. Sometimes an auditee will take us up on it and we'll have one or two things, and sometimes they don't. Again, it also is, I will say, it is key to our budget. You know, we have an audit budget for each engagement. So we'll come out, we'll meet with you and your team. We have our audit program for the areas we're going to look at, and then we start doing field work is where we're really diving in. We're looking through documentations, we're talking to staff, we're talking to individuals. But during this process, as we're doing our field work, if we have any questions about anything, you know, we're going to come see you and say, hey, we can't locate this. We found this. This is what it means. My point in that is by the time we get to an exit conference, which is the next step, you really shouldn't be hearing anything in that exit conference that you didn't hear during the field work, unless something came up during the QA process while a supervisor was looking over the work papers, getting ready for the exit conference. Something came up. And even then, we're probably going to reach out to you by telephone. So after we do our field work, we're going to come back. Again, the work is going to be QA'd in-house. It's going to be, the work papers are going to be reviewed. And we're going to call you and we're going to ask for an exit conference. An exit conference is where we sit down, we go over our findings with you. Again, you shouldn't be hearing anything for the first time. If you had any concerns, we'll have recommendations. And those will be issues that you will have to address in terms of a corrective action plan. Now, you know your organization. So if we have an issue and we recommend ABC, certainly you can say, well, we understand what you're saying and how to get to the final result. But instead of XYZ, a better path for us is 1, 2, 3. And as long as we agree that whatever your corrective action plan resolves the issue, we're good. So once we have the exit conference, we get your corrective action plan, then we mock up a draft of the report. It'll come back to the executive director, owner, etc., for a 24-hour review. The reason this brief time frame is because there's nothing in there that has not been seen or discussed. It's really just so you make sure we entered your corrective action plan as you provided it to us. Once you accept that draft, we issue it in final. Issuing it final means it goes to the DDSN Commission, DDSN Executive Management, to the, if it's a nonprofit and you have a board of directors, it goes to them. And then, of course, it goes to the executive director or owner of the auditee. Also know when we do come out and do an audit and we have issues and you have to provide us a corrective action plan, we will be conducting a follow-up audit. So if we have a follow-up audit, depends, could be anywhere from it really sort of depends on the actions you're taking in your action plan. It could be as short as 6 or 8 months, but generally it falls within the year, 12-month area. When we come back to do that, we're really just looking at the follow-up items. So it's not a full audit all over again. We're just looking at areas where we had concerns and where you provided us a corrective action plan to make sure that you, in fact, implemented that corrective action plan. All right. Audit policy.
Another page?
Yes, please. All right. So you have, when you agree to be a DDSN provider, there are some contractual requirements in your contract that you have to follow. And one of them says you're going to comply with all the directives. And one of the directives, actually 2 of the directives, deal with financial reporting, either financial attestation audits or report on applying agreed upon procedures. So for your financial audits, those are required of every board, We did have a change. It used to be 90 days. It's now 120 days. They're due 120 days after the close of your fiscal year. For the privates out there, this only applies to you if you are a provider of residential services. So the audit is required for all DDSN boards, and it's required for private providers who provide residential services. Included in that audit, we need a management letter. The management letter is a letter that's submitted on your letterhead, signed by the executive director, the owner, whoever is the responsible party, and it lists any type of financial services that your organization receives. So, for example, it's definitely going to include the CPA firm that's doing your financial audit and doing your ROAP. But if you have somebody that does payroll, if you have a financial consultant, if you have somebody different for some reason that does your cost reporting, so any financial services need to be included on this letter. All right, ROAP requirement. So you're going to hear, just to give you all the different vernaculars that I can think of, report on applying agreed upon procedures. You're going to hear it called as ROAP. You're going to hear it called an agreed upon procedures report. You're going to hear it called an AUP. Any of those terminologies, we're talking about the same thing, and that's this report right here. So you are required to have a ROAP if you have over $250,000 in DDSN revenue. The caveat here, and I do know we have some private EI providers, so tune in right here. The caveat for this $250,000 requirement for EIs, it includes your DDSN revenue and your BabyNet revenue. So you need to be tracking both of those revenue streams to see if you go over the $250,000 requirement. And if you do, then you need to hire a CPA to do this report. There are several things in there, again, depending on what service line you're in. But for all of them, they're going to be looking at Medicaid billing, no matter what service line you're in. So they're going to look at your billing, they're going to look at documentation, make sure the documentation is there to support the billing. If you're a residential provider, there's some additional requirements in terms of looking at consumer funds and minimum salary requirements for direct care staff. Again, it's all spelled out in the directive. I cannot emphasize enough. Well, let me say this. Also, this report, we have different time frames here. So this ROAP is due 90 days after the close of your fiscal year. So whenever your fiscal year closes out, this report is due to us 90 days after the fact. I cannot stress enough the importance that you share this directive and all of the attachments that go with it, which they're listed separately on the DDSN website. You need to include all of those attachments and the directive and give it to your CPA. Remember, folks, DDSN doesn't contract with the CPA. You contract with the CPA. So it's your responsibility to make sure that they understand the time frames and they're going to be able to meet the time frames. That becomes very important as we move to the next step in this next bullet. So again, it's your responsibility. They are your contractor. The reason being is for each day that this report is late, it's a $100 a day contract reduction with a $2,500 cap. So that's why I'm trying to emphasize it's your contractor. You need to make sure that they're staying on task and they're going to meet those time frames. Another important point, one of those attachments to this directive is the report template. We have set that up so it covers, the way it's written, it covers everything that's required in this directive. They simply need to follow that template. Fill in the blanks. This is not an area where they need to get creative and decide they want to write their own report. They just need to follow that template. Because if we get it in a different format, we're going to send it back to you and say it's unacceptable. So please make sure that you provide all this information to your CPA up front. The two directives, if you're a private, it's 27506 DD. If you're a board, it's 27504. I will say that, yep, we get into that later. So I think we can move on to the next slide. Yep, so I think we touched on some of this early on that prior slide. We'll run through it quickly then. One of the things in the ROAP is disclosure on treatment of consumer funds. The CPA has to disclose in detail how provider handle consumer personal funds. Each program, each residential program needs to be broken out in terms of ICF, CTH2, SLP1, SLP2, et cetera, et cetera. If you do have any findings in these, again, just like an audit report, we require a corrective action plan. You need to make sure that that includes the date of implementation. A lot of them we get say, we're going to train. If training is involved, then you need to detail the scope, the duration, the date. A lot of folks will send us when they conducted the training, they'll send us the sign-in sheet. And then also, if there's anything in the Medicaid billing section and there's any services where the service was not documented, it was billed for, but there was not documentation to support the service, that's going to need to be unbilled, and you need to send us copies of the error correction forms. Sample sizes, CPAs are required to state the size of the samples from the population as a whole. I will tell you, we're having instances in the next directive, look for this to be maybe more prescriptive, which I hate, but we're just finding some sample sizes that, to be quite honest, aren't adequate. But as it sits right now, they have to disclose their sample size in relation to the population. As I mentioned earlier, another thing, if they're a residential provider, they're going to be looking for minimum pay for direct care staff. Again, only residential. And then finally down there, and I just want to reemphasize again, you're the contractor of the CPA, not DDSN. It's up to you to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Also, they need to know that these work papers may be available for the Board of Accountancy for review for compliance with their guidelines. Report requirements. So external audit reporting. So this is for your financial audits. There is within that directive, there's a website to upload an electronic copy of your financial report. You also need to send a hard copy. You don't. In the past, we had required a hard copy go to the districts. That is no longer required. On your ROAP reports, we'll accept soft copies of those or hard copies. If you're going to email them to us, either include it to the entire audit distribution, or at a minimum, make sure that it comes to myself and Brian Nanny. We do try to reach out to you, hopefully within 48 hours, if not sooner, once we receive these. So that you know that we received it. So my point is if you haven't heard from us within 48 hours and you emailed it, you probably need to follow up. Quarterly financial reporting. This was a requirement that we had years ago. We sort of got away from it. It's now, again, required, and it's due 30 days after the end of your closure of that quarter. To my knowledge, that comes to Chris and his team. Haven't heard of any issues with that. They get it timely.
We're having to send general reminders to a lot of providers to get their information in. We don't strictly enforce that deadline right now. And it's one of those things that it only happens every 90 days, so it's hard to remember to do it unless you set up a calendar reminder or something. But for the most part, yeah, once we remind them, folks are pretty good about going ahead and getting it turned in.
Good. And again, we put this in because a lot can happen in a year. I mean, when it sort of fell to the wayside and we would get one audit report and then next year get the other audit report, there was a lot of downward trends that happened in that 1 year period. So this is a way that we can sort of look at what's going on in a briefer time span. So if we do see something that we need to address, we can get on it a lot quicker. Also, in this requirement, you're going to report on direct bill and Medicare Part D, respite, self-directed care, and then your OPEB benefits.
Are we on another one?
Yep.
Okie dokie.
Think so. Just remember, please call us, as I stated at the beginning of the training. If you have any questions, seriously, we would like for you to call us so we can discuss those up front and save everybody some time on the back end. We do have training available, including for board member training. And again, if you need us, please reach out and call us. Next one. All right, just when you're doing your own sort of QA, these are some tips. Again, it's not a one-person show. It requires program team involvement when you're dealing with anything, operational or consumer-oriented, but especially for consumer funds, for large purchases, trips, etc. That doesn't need to be a unilateral decision. If there's a question about a receipt or an expenditure, don't just accept a verbal explanation, dig into it, look for documentation, look for verification from other parties. Make sure, as required in the directive, somebody is monitoring receipts and expenditures by an independent person. You need a different set of eyes on that than just the person who's making the expenditure. Unannounced visits from management to offices to outlying areas. What we have sort of historically found is the further out either a day program or a residence is located, the less frequently they get visited. Don't let that happen to you. If you're doing a cash counts, any cash count ought to be done on a surprise basis. You don't prescript it. You don't go the second Tuesday of every month. You always have some variance in that process. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call us. Then on the back end, I think we're running over a little bit. So back end is just some tips for prevention, detection of fraud. I'll let you read through those. So Andrew is eagerly awaiting in the wings.
You got 2 or 3 minutes still.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So prevention, detection of fraud. These are just some tips. Have a written code of ethics. Don't wait until something happens. Have the expectation in writing up front. I would have my employees sign it as part of their orientation process and keep a copy of that. As with everything, it's top down. So set a good example from the top down. Employees are going to emulate what they see happening above them. Reasonable expectations. Treat employees well. You need to make sure that you restrict bank account access and restrict access to consumer funds. Not everybody in a house needs to have access to that. It needs to be limited to the minimum staff as is necessary. Make sure you're performing your bank account reconciliations in a timely manner. It's spelled out in the directive. I think it's 20 business days after receipt. But we've had issues before where people have stolen checks when they were leaving. They've gone out and cashed them. And fortunately, it was caught, and the provider did a reconciliation timely, so they caught it immediately. If you let those lag, that can sort of go on and on and on. Make sure that you are securing inventories and supplies, that you have a process to monitor that. You have internal controls surrounding those areas. Number 8, pre-screen employee applicants. I cannot stress this enough that a couple hours spent on the front end will save you hours and hours and hours of headache potentially on the back end. So make sure you do all your background checks, check your references, check their work references. Give employees a way to report fraud so that they know. And again, it's a culture. Make sure, and not just employees. I think we do a pretty good job training employees. Give service recipients a way to report fraud and let them know that certainly that is your expectation, that if there is something that is going on or services aren't taking place, you want to know. Their services will not be affected. I can't tell you how many times when we go out and talk to families, what we hear is, well, I knew something was up, but I didn't want to say anything because I was afraid I'd lose a little bit of services that I was getting. And that's just unacceptable. So make sure that your employees and service recipients have a way to report fraud. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give internal audit a call. And with that, do we have any questions?
I'm not able to really monitor chat without covering up the.
Angela?
I'm looking. I don't see any conversation.
All right. Well, if y'all think of something, if this sort of is rumbling around in your head and you think of something later, please give us a call. Thank y'all. Andrew?
Andrew, do you want to sit here or do you want to do like Kevin and sit over there and I'll handle the screen?
Appropriately.
Yeah.
Just prompt me if I need to do
Kevin's
anything.
not here. Can I be seen right here?
Yep. No, we're not on video. I turned the video off. They just see our
Oh, okay.
what's up on TV right now.
I got you. See here. All right, just to quickly introduce myself for people who may not know me, my name is Andrew Theron. I'm a licensed engineer here with the agency. I've been here for about 10 years now. I've been in the position of Director of Engineering and Planning for about 2 years now. Chris, when he took this position, he asked me to put something together and kind of start speaking to this group to kind of bring in the facility aspect of budgeting and how that relates to what goes on downstairs here in our budget and finance department. And I think if you got any experience with maintaining commercial properties, because that's really what we've got, it can be rather expensive, and it's definitely something that you need to plan for. The type of facilities we typically have in our agency and across the provider network can range anywhere from ICF, which is, according to the building code, no different than Prisma Health across the street here at DDSN. It's a mini hospital for all intents and purposes, and we can range all the way down to a CTH2, which would fall somewhere in the residential code. So all different types of facilities, and knowing what you're dealing with can definitely affect how you budget to take care of that facility. Starting out here, this quote, when I do my own research on this topic and facility management and budgeting for it, this quote I came across several times, so I thought it was a good rule of thumb to include to a crowd who may not know a lot about facilities, but more about budgets. And that, just to read it here real quick, an appropriate budget allocation for the routine maintenance and repair for a substantial inventory of facilities will typically be in the range of 2 to 4% of aggregated current replacement value of those facilities, excluding land and major associated infrastructure. In the absence of specific information up which to base the maintenance and repair budget, this funding level should be used as an absolute minimum value. Where neglect of maintenance has caused a baggage of needed repairs to accumulate, spending much exceeded this minimum level until the backlog has been eliminated. And this quote is it's got a little bit of age on it. That's from 1990, but I think it's it's based off the value of the facility, so I think it's still a good rule of thumb today to use. So if you don't know anything about facilities, how to take care of them, as money people, you can look at how much you're spending on your facilities and kind of get a good idea for where you are and kind of plan accordingly there. Moving on to this next section, large expenditure items. These are things that, over my experience here with the agency, that we are always spending money on. They are big ticket items, expensive, things that typically you need to budget for over time. And that is building envelope, which consists of your roof, your cladding, your walls, brick facades, siding, waterproofing, windows, doors, essentially trying to keep a dry structure. And if you start there, you'll have a good building to work with if you can keep your building envelope healthy and dry. You can always move inside after that and take care of any other issues you have. HVAC equipment, all heating, cooling, and ventilation equipment that may be associated with your buildings. For a larger facility, something like central office here, I think our HVAC system here was just over $1 million. To give you an idea of what some of these systems can cost when you get into the larger ones. Most smaller facilities, we're just dealing with a couple heat pumps, so nothing major. But if you got a pretty good inventory size of them, it's something that you want to get a good handle on how many you got, how old they are. So you can budget replacements as needed. I'll have to wait till they're failing on you, and leave you without heat or cooling or something like that. Fire protection systems next on the list. This includes fire alarms and sprinkler systems. Again, we've got a lot of old fire alarm and sprinkler systems, and we are always seeing repair on these type of things. Also, if you had to get in and add systems like these, they're typically pretty costly as well. So I want to include those on the list as something you'll probably see a lot of. And I've got some more about that down in the next section. Some stuff that we've talked about recently in some of the finance meetings here that we'll get into. Next section, preventative maintenance and inspections for these type of items, for the large items. These are things that you kind of want to budget for annually. They're things that they're coming every year. That you need to plan on them, so to put them in the budget and make sure that you're covered in these areas is always a good idea. Roofs, commercial roofs, again, to use central office here as an example. We've got a flat roof here. It's a commercial roof. Typically a good idea to have those things inspected twice a year. They typically say in the fall and the spring at your significant temperature changes are good times to do that. If you don't know a lot about roofs, it's always good to have a good roofing consultant that you can call. Even myself, I'm familiar with some things, but I'm much more comfortable having a professional who does this for a living get up there and get us a report on what they're seeing. It'll help us plan for any major repairs and address items before they become big, start causing leaks and lead to further damage in the building. Residential buildings or just typical shingles typically be visually inspected every 3 years. And I put on there a lot of what we don't see sometimes is getting the gutters cleaned annually. Getting your gutters cleaned out can definitely save some rot and decay issues when it comes to the eaves and fascia boards on your roofs. Next topic, HVAC. Standard heat pumps, again, is what we're dealing with a lot of our facilities. They should be inspected and serviced by a professional technician at least once a year. Filters should be visually inspected monthly and changed if necessary. And so if you don't have anyone on staff that is covering things like that, then you got to get some type of service contract to get someone to come out and perform proper preventive maintenance on your HVAC systems. Commercial boilers and chillers, these are typically found on larger buildings, and they can be pretty costly. What we've got at a lot of our centers are boilers and chillers on buildings that are too small for them and probably should have never been set up like that from a design perspective. And over time, it costs you a lot more money. So we're looking at a lot of these buildings now and trying to downsize to more efficient type systems. But if you do have any boilers and chillers, they typically need to be serviced and inspected annually. So again, work those inspections into your annual budgets. Fire protection systems, again, also annually inspected. Like I mentioned above, making sure you have the right type of system is always a good idea. we've got a lot of facilities around the state, and it has a lot to do with license changes over times, building code changes that have left some facilities with larger systems than what's needed. And maintaining those systems over time can be costly. So if you really start looking, over several years and looking at the cost of downsizing those systems, it could save you money in the long run to downsize those systems to what's needed and not have to maintain those big commercial systems. So if you got any questions about any of the fire protection stuff, such as downsizing systems, please give me a call and we can talk about that more specifically. Continuing on, generators. Generators are definitely useful when you need them when the power goes out, but they are expensive items to install and maintain over their life. So I wanted to put those on here to make people aware that they are require just as much inspection and testing as other elements in the building. They need to be serviced by a licensed technician annually, and it's recommended that they are load bank tested every 3 years. A load bank test is where they will hook up a power source to the generator and run it for several hours, kind of run it in a real life type situation, just to make sure that it can do what it's rated to do. Next item on the list, professional design services. Knowing when an engineer or an architect or professional services are required can definitely help you budget for those expenses. A lot of state laws and regulations require when architects and engineers need to be involved in certain types of construction or renovations. Again, looking back at ICFs, they are institutional occupancy is not any different than a hospital. It's usually required by DHEC that any work done to an ICF have an architect or an engineer involved with it. So it's always good to check with DHEC up front to make sure that they're okay with how you're proceeding with a certain project, and to budget for an architect or engineer if you need to. Typically, professional fees for architects or engineers can run you about 8 to 12% of the project costs, and that's dependent typically on the size, scope of project. But that's kind of a good range to budget when you planning things out. And I've got a section in here. I'm not sure if it's on y'all's slide here that we're kind of doing in-house, and that's kind of how to budget for facility care and maintenance. If you just really start trying to put it down on paper, all the different facilities you have, all the components inside of them, what the roof conditions are like, what the HVAC conditions look, or the condition of those HVAC units, windows, doors, anything that you can create some type of inventory on across all of your buildings, so you can look at it on paper and see what condition things are in, and kind of help plan out over time. I think that's a good strategy to kind of put in place. So again, if you got any questions about that, please get in touch with me. I can kind of explain to you what we're doing here in house, if you want us to set something like that up. And then last, I've got our contact information down here. Again, my name's Andrew Theron. We've got Seth Leslie downstairs with us, Shirley Wilson as a big help down there, and Greg's more part-time, but he does a lot with energy management. So if you got questions about budgeting for energy type projects, or whether or not something will pay off in the long run to save a little bit of energy, Greg will be a good guy to contact over anything like that. So
Good deal.
that's really all I got. So again, give me a call if you got any questions, want to talk about anything more specific. But that's all I got, Chris.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right. LaKenya, are you online? Are you going to present from where you are? Are you coming down and joining me? You're there?
Chris, can you hear me?
Barely.
Can you hear me now?
Angela, can you speak to whether y'all can hear her? I might be different.
Is everybody able to hear me?
Yeah, I have no idea. You can go ahead.
You want to go ahead and get started?
That's much better, whatever you just did. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, now you're really clear. Yep, good
All right,
deal.
you good now? Okay, good. All right, thank you. Okay, so to get started, we are going to go over the fiscal year 21 invoices that are on R2D2. So the big changes that we have are noted in the first two notes at the beginning of this document that you're currently looking at. Your logs have to be submitted and approved, and the service notes must be submitted by 6 p.m. on the 5th business day of each month. Please note that if your logs are late and they're not turned in on time, they will not appear on your invoice for the month that you are entering those notes in for. So for example, we just closed out the January 2021 cycle. All of those notes needed to be entered on February the 5th. So if those notes or those logs were late, they will not show up on that January 2021 invoice, and that they would, once submitted and approved, they would have to show up on the following month's invoice for you to receive payment. And also beginning with the January 2021 invoices, you will no longer be required to sign and submit those invoices to DDSN. We are going to now produce those invoices in-house. We're going to handle getting those to AP and getting you paid. Even though we are responsible for paying those invoices, it's still going to be your responsibility to review those invoices within 30 days that they are available on R2D2, and to notify us in the service department if you notice any corrections that need to be made to your invoices. Okay, so we're going to go through real quick on how to run each invoice. The first one is your early intervention. The steps for these have not changed on how to access them. You go to R2D2, go to the DDSN reports, then logs, service notes, and then it's going to be your service notes invoice for early intervention. And the current rate that we are paying is $23.74. And below in the parameters, that is going to be your screenshot on how to kind of navigate what exactly needs to be put in to run your invoice. So if you're running your invoice for January, you're going to enter in 01 for the month, 2021 for your cycle year. For show details, you can either run it with yes to show you each consumer and all of the caseworkers, and then to give you more of a detailed breakdown of the units that are being paid and not paid. Or you can do no, which is going to give you just a quick summary of exactly the grand total of what you're going to get paid for that month. And then you also have to have your provider number in there. The next one is for the state funded case management. You go through the same steps. It's just going to be titled the service notes invoice for SFCM. And currently that rate being paid is $15 for an office visit and $20 for a home. And again, we still just need you to review all of your invoices. The next one is Medicaid targeted case management. You go through the same steps. It's going to be titled the service notes invoice for MTCM. The current rate being paid is $15 for an office visit, $20 for a home visit. The next one is your waiver case management invoices. Again, in the same location, just titled the service notes invoice for waiver case management. Currently, we're paying $15.63 for a no travel effective January 1 of 2021, I believe, or 2020. And then $25.42 for a travel visit. Okay. All right, so the next one here are for your day service invoices. These are the new invoices that you are just now seeing for January 2021. How to get those invoices? You go to R2D2, the DDSN logs, go to logs, then DSAL and ResLog, then DSAL, and then it's going to be titled the invoice for DSAL. So when you click on that invoice for DSAL, it's going to give you the different types that you are going to be able to pull for your invoices. The first type, you can either do your CSW, IDRD residential, non-residential, and HASKI. You have the option and the parameters to either run those 3 invoices separately, or you can run it as waiver totals only, which is going to pull all 3 of those waivers together into one remittance. Then you can also run your state-funded community support, which are your consumers enrolled in Funding Band A. Then you also have your remittance for state-funded follow-along, which are your consumers in Funding Band Q. And then the last one are the state-funded, excluding community support and follow-along. And that's kind of like a drop-down invoice from the consumers that are not going to show up on either your state-funded community support or the state-funded follow-along invoices. And then at the very bottom, if you have any other services that are included in the state-funded community support, those will have to be manually invoiced to us each month, as you have previously been doing for this fiscal year. So for services such as, trying to think of an example, if you have a consumer who is getting like a life alert system, trying to think of another one. Any services that is not day, that is going to be captured in your state-funded community supports, that's going to have to be manually invoiced to us. And those invoices can be submitted through RBC. And we're going to go over in just a few minutes on how to get through RBC to send us any kind of documentation that has to come back to our office. This here is just a quick go-to calendar on for your important due dates for your ResLog and DSAL. Just kind of pointing out that all of your logs need to be submitted by the 5th business day of each month. The invoices are going to be available on the 6th business day of each month. And I just noted some holidays in there, just in case they kind of fall around the time of invoices being produced and your due dates for each month. Okay. So the next page is going over how to upload to RBC. Again, RBC is our reporting and billing center. It's just a secure way of sending us your documents so that we can get those in a timely manner and get those processed. This is the how to access the portal. That is the web address at the very top. If you do not see RBC listed under the DDSN web application listing when you first log in, just contact our help desk and they'll be able to walk you through exactly the steps that you need to be able to get to RBC. But once you have the access, you're just going to click on RBC from the main page. You're going to click on Upload Document, and then we have document types. So we have different ones that you can choose from, whether you're sending us a invoice that you notice that needs some corrections to it, whether you're sending us any of your RESPIT ISR files, any service area correction forms, and in those documents we have different document types. Then you're going to click the choose file so that you're selecting that file from your computer, then upload document, and then you should have a confirmation page that comes up after it has been successfully sent to us. Okay. Okay, so these next few pages, these are going over the different type of procedure codes and modifiers based upon waiver type to help you go through your waiver credit reports. So this first couple pages, these are for CSW. Then we go through the HASKI, and then the IDRD procedure codes. So this is just a very useful handout just to use when you're going over and you're checking to see exactly what services that you're being charged for. This is kind of like your sheet to go to. Okay, so then, there we go. So this is the section 1 of our chapter 10 finance manual. This is going to give you more detail of the residential services. So it kind of goes over some of your definition, your service codes that you have. how to report your attendance every day, how the laws are going to be produced. They are being generated through STS. So if a consumer is not enrolled in STS as showing that they have that service, they're not going to show up in your res log because those two systems work together. It also goes over some of the status codes that you can use when you're recording the consumer's attendance each month, whether for a residential facility or an ICF facility. Let's see. And then also, again, these laws have to be submitted and approved by the 5th business day of each month. All right, and that the example that you're currently looking at, that is if you were not able to get a consumer onto your res log in our DDSN portal. You would have to send us this paper to show us the consumer's attendance so that you can receive payment for that consumer. Let's see. The next one is the hospice services information sheet. This is going to be sent to us if you have a consumer who is being enrolled in a hospice service so that we are aware of the hospice provider, everything that is going on with that consumer since they are still in the facility, but they are receiving the hospice service now. So the sheet that you're seeing now, that is the full version of the sheet of that document, and this is the full version of the residential census log. So I'm going to keep on going. This is the section 2 for DSAL. Again, this is going to give you details of the adult day services that are being recorded in DSAL, the different fundings that we have based upon the consumers that are going to be listed on your log. And again, just note that we added 2 new funding sources, the WI, which is for an IDRD waiver, not receiving residential, and then a WR, which is a IDRD waiver receiving residential. Those are 2 new funding sources, starting with January. Then next, it kind of just goes through reporting your attendance, how to mark whether that consumer was absent or present for that AM or a PM service. Let's see. Then again, these laws have to be submitted and approved by the 5th business day. Okay.
We got a heck of a lag here, LaKenya.
I know. All right.
I click it here and about 5 seconds later it shows up on the screen.
I got you. Okay. All right. So the page that I'm looking at right now is just the blank adult half-day roll book. Okay, so on that roll book, this is for you to send to us and complete if you were not able to get that consumer into your DSAL on the DDSN portal. As long as STS is being updated, those consumers you should be able to pull them up on your electronic DSAL. But if not, this is what we're going to need to be able to see that that person actually attended that day program.
LaKenya, I just gave you control.
Okay, so you just need me to click
That
at
little arrow over to the left, right by 212 is the one you need to hit.
Okay, let me see.
Yep. This one right here.
Let me go to the actual size.
Or we can page down, I think, will work also.
Hold on one
Right there,
second.
yep.
There we go. Okay, I see it's a delay. I got you. Okay, and then so next, this is the blank roll book for adult alloy services. Again, we would just need this if you were not able to get them into your DSAL log. Okay, so this is the actual form, full page form that you could return back to us for the adult half day. And then this is the full document to return to us for adult employment services. All right, section 5, it goes over the environmental and private vehicle modifications. So currently, we updated the form. I'm gonna go to it real quick for you. We updated the form for Title A, request for modification, that would be sent to us so that we can now pay the service provider directly for those modifications that are being performed. And this applies for environmental modifications and private vehicle modifications. We would just need this form sent back to us. Include a copy of the invoice, the waiver authorization, and we will also need the service provider's W-9 if they have not been approved as a state vendor, because on our end we will need them to be go through that process of signing up as a state vendor, so that we are going to be able to pay them directly. And this is just a full page form that you would use to fill out. Okay. We are currently still using this form only for the assistive technology services that a consumer may have. You will still need to send this to us regardless of the dollar amount, because we will be able to reimburse for over 1,000. And then even if that falls under, if your service falls under that threshold, we will still need that information so that we are able to bill Medicaid for those services. So that's the one for an IDRD assistive tech. And if you may have a assistive tech for a community supports waiver, but I think that's maybe a very rare situation, I believe, Chris.
Say that one more time.
For a CSW consumer to receive assistive technology. They don't have that very often, do they?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't believe I see a whole lot of them like that, but just in case if you do, that's the form that we will need for us to be able to review that assistive technology charge. Right. So section 6, this goes over the waiver, respite, care reporting, and the billing. I just want to note that in that second paragraph, it says effective January 1, all respite services for consumers that reside in the community payment will be handled between the fiscal agent and DSM. So I just want to make you aware of those changes. The ISR reports, which are your blank logs that you receive in the mail each month, usually those always be mailed out around the 25th of each month. So we would need those ISRs filled out and completed each month so that we are able to see exactly the services that those consumers are receiving. It goes over the non-facility based hourly respite, and then the facility-based respite. And when you return these forms to us, either you can return them via mail or via RBC. RBC is probably preferred since we can get it almost instantly time you upload it. But if you choose to send us something through RBC, please do not, again, mail us a copy of it in the mail. All right, so this is an example of what your ISR will look like for respite care. And this is what the summary page is going to look like, because the first one was based upon per individual, and this is going to be your summary page that comes along with your ISRs. Section 7 goes over our supported living program. I know that this section is currently being updated. Just to kind of give you an update on what's going on, the paper laws are no longer being mailed out for the SLP consumers. This data is now being recorded in TheraP. So you will only need to send us an invoice for your residential SLP consumers. because on our end, we're able to go into TheraP and run a report each month to see exactly all the SLP data. So you're not actually going to receive a physical paper log in the mail anymore for your SLP consumers. Page. So I'm kind of skip over this since we're not doing the paper version anymore. All right, so this is section 8, which goes over the case notes reporting and billing procedures for case management and early intervention. Again, this just tells you that that the case management and early intervention services are required to document your activity each month in your case notes, because that data is what's going to be pulled over into your invoice each month for us to be able to pay. And since that DDSN is now handling those invoices in-house, we will have those invoices sent to AP within 10 business days after they are made available. And then payment for those invoices will appear by electronic deposit if you have elected for electronic deposit. Section 10, this is for our HCB waiver caregiver services reporting and billing procedures. This is going to go over the 3 different categories that we have for caregiver services, which are companion services, personal care 1, and personal care 2. So this kind of walks you over the different rules and categories and definitions that you may need for each of those different services. Okay, and then also again, if you are not receiving a ISR for a consumer that has this service, that may mean that SCS needs to be updated for that service, for that consumer, so that when Carol is able to generate that ISR each month, that is going to be, our IT team is going to give her that paper version of that consumer's log for that month. If you, I know that when she mails those out, she also gives you blank copies of it, so you can also use one of the blank ISRs to record one of those consumers who may not have been updated in SCS in time. So you can use that and just return that back to our office. Okay, so this is just going to be an example of what your ISR will look like for a companion service. Okay, and this is what the summary report will look like for that caregiver service. Okay, so this is a individual HASCI form that would need to be completed and submitted to our office if you are serving a HASCI consumer and you want to get paid for their services that you are providing to them. You would just fill this out for that individual and detail out the service and the data service that you are providing, and then that's going to come to us so that we will be able to pay you. Okay. And then this one's just the monthly provider summary that goes along with the previous page that we just looked at, which is kind of like your summary page for all of your consumers and a grand total amount due. Right, this is section 11, which goes over these.
It's something like this a long time.
But I just try to do it at work. That's why I be so tired. But y'all, you be fucking like, you come home and you should pass out. It be got to be on information overload.
Did you have a question for us?
No, that was really funny though.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And that's going to be caught in our training that's going to be put on the web. So that's funny. You didn't drop a cuss word in any of that.
Okay, so this is going to be section 11, which is the service provision logs, individual service reports, mailing request procedures. This is just going to go over if you want to notify SERV of the names of the staff who should receive the printed ISRs by mail, we would just need these forms returned back to us so that we can send that to the designated person that you would prefer to have those logs receive each month. Okay, so this is an example of what that request form looks like. All right, and then so this is the actual form that you can return back to us for the ISR mailing request. And then this is the ISR approval signature designation form that would be returned back to us also. All right, Section 13 goes over the service error correction form procedures. And we will only need a service error correction form if something has been submitted and approved either in ResLog or DSAL or either in your service notes. Because once those have been submitted and approved, we cannot go back into the system and make any changes. So you will have to fill out a service error correction form, detail out for us exactly what was reported incorrectly, and then tell us what the correction should be. So this just kind of goes over those instructions. And again, you can send that through to us through RBC. This is an example of a early intervention service error correction form. They were stating that they reported as 1 hour 15 minutes and that it should have just been 1 hour. So telling us exactly what the error is and what the correction should be. Okay. So this is an example for one if you have a case management error that you made. And this is an example that you can follow for a day service error. All right, so Section 16 goes over the financial managers and reporting documents procedures.
And we have not had time to update this section yet. You'll notice this is still from 17. I did want to put it in here just so folks had it, but it will be modified.
Gotcha. Okay, because pretty much what is going over are the financial managers, your service providers and the QPLs, exactly what services that you probably are providing, and the ones that you will have to, I believe, invoice us for, like if you were a qualified provider or if you are a DSM board, some of the stuff that you may be seeing in your provider payments each month. Okay. Let me get you to, and I believe this is our last section. There we go. Okay, so Section 18 goes over the waiver credit report procedures. Again, this section of this manual is going to go over how to run your waiver credit reports each month so that you are able to monitor exactly what is going on with your consumers. It gives you kind of step-by-steps on how to run it, how to get to that report through R2D2. This includes the updated screenshot of now what the parameters look like since we are now running the waiver credit reports. Starting with the October 2020 waiver credit reports, we are running them for residential only to be recouped through your provider payments. So again, this just kind of goes through the different parameters that you need to enter in to get your report each month. So this is an example of what your report will look like once it has been generated. Okay. And then also too, if you notice any errors on your waiver credit reports, sometimes that may be something that you need to discuss with the actual provider who is providing the service, because they may be overbilling or using the wrong procedure code. So that may be something that that service provider has to correct on their end. Or if you have a error, for example, if you have a consumer who's showing up under you as a financial manager and you are no longer the financial manager for that consumer, if you see those kind of errors, you can send those to our serve department. I'll be able to review those within 3 months of that error showing up in your waiver credit report. And that way, once I review it, if I notice that it is an error, I can make adjustments on a future payment schedule for you so that you can be reimbursed for those corrections that need to be made. Okay, so this is the actual service error correction form that you would complete and send back to us. All right. So I think that is everything for our slides. I know there's a lot of information in a very short time period. Does anybody have any questions though?
I'll have to get the box back over everybody to see. if you got any
No questions, Chris. There are no questions.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, we will go ahead and break. We will meet back here at 10:45. So thank you for catching us up, LaKenya. We were a little behind when you took the ball.
Yeah, I was trying to keep you on schedule for today, so you're
All
welcome.
right. Thank you. So you get a little bit of extra time for your break, folks. So we'll see you back here at 10:45 sharp. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're unmuted.
Good morning. This is Kareem Briggs from Information Security Office. I have with me my deputy, Charles Crum. Just want to jump into giving you guys a refresher or brand new briefing on your role in information security and what we do here at DDSN. So first off, you see information security is your responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility when it comes to ensuring the security and privacy of the data that we have at our disposal. The main thing to understand is that we want to empower you to have all the tools and resources necessary so you won't become the weakest link when it deals with DDSN consumer information. Just a quick overview of what Charles and I's department is responsible for as it comes to DDSN as well as our external network. We're responsible for information security and privacy policy development and enforcement, information accountability and assessments and audits, information security threat and vulnerability management. And the next two are probably the most important things to you guys, which is cybersecurity incident and HIPAA breach response, and cybersecurity awareness and HIPAA training. Charles and I are responsible for ensuring that you guys get the necessary tools and methods in place if there's ever a security incident or a HIPAA breach. If you do experience anything of that nature, whether it's a break-in, stolen data, lost devices, or any type of phishing scams, we ask that you contact our office immediately or as soon as possible after you notice it. You can always reach us at risk@ddsn.sc.gov. And what we'll do is walk you through the steps necessary to respond to the incident or breach and get information regarding your mitigation efforts, whether it's things that you have to do at your particular facility or getting police reports that we need to document the situation. Next item is the cybersecurity awareness and HIPAA training. Right now, you should be in the midst of the new SANS security awareness training through our Litmos platform. This is a little bit, I think, better than the one we had before, which is still SANS, but it was a VLE platform. This gives you and your team admins at your facilities a little bit more flexibility as far as maintaining records for your individual teams. But if there's any questions that you have about the training or run into any troubles, you can always reach out to Charles and myself. Best way is through the risk@ddsn.sc.gov email, which goes to both of us. One or both of us will reach out to you and make sure that we get you on the right path.
Navigating it.
Yeah.
It's a tiny little arrow, isn't it?
As I mentioned, the SANS training, it starts every year from January to October. This new, the way we have the training set up for this year and going forward is in the compliance mode. So what that means is you have until October 31st to go through this initial run of the SANS training, which includes 25 modules, approximately 60 minutes of training, which you don't have to do in one setting. You can start and stop and start again at your leisure. But what happens is when you complete the training initially, your deadline the following years will be based on your completion date this year. So if you complete the training today, what is this, the 10th? February 10th, 2021, your new deadline will be February 10th, 2022. And you'll get reminders going forward from that point on.
Kareem, we have a question.
Yes.
We have a question on who is required to do this SANS training.
Board of directors are not required to do the training for the different areas, but everyone else who comes in contact with any physical or digital consumer information is required to take the training.
So almost any employee.
Yeah, any employee within the network. I mean, we did exclude board of directors, members of the board, because they don't normally come into contact with that data. So we ask that each team admin has rights to add new users to their specific platform. So if you don't add the board of directors, then they won't get the notification to complete the training. Does that answer your question?
Private providers need to have all their staff do this training, even if we already have our own internal training on this.
If you have your own internal training, what we can do is you can let us know what type of training that is, and we can actually document it on our side that you've completed the training. But we need to have a record that you are doing the training, so we can go into the SANS system and document that you have completed for that year. But you need to send us a roster of those users that have completed the training with the dates that they have completed it.
And is there required content in regards to that training, or just that they had a training?
I mean, we would like to see what type of content it is.
An agenda or something.
Right. And if there's like a Q&A, I know with some of the other providers and boards that do a classroom training, they do it based on our SANS training. But we've put together a Q&A for that training, so they can actually have a classroom setting where they'll just run through the 25 modules, and at the end they'll do an acknowledgement of the classroom roster to answer the questions, and then they'll send us a list of those users, and we'll update the training within the platform. But if you do have your own internal training, if you could run that past risk@ddsn.sc.gov, so we can just make sure that it's including the appropriate information. We want to make sure that your users are getting enough information to make sure they are following, best practice when it comes to dealing with our data.
Okay, and she had another comment that we are not running classroom trainings. Our trainings are online due to COVID. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's fine. We just still need to understand, we need to know who did it and when, and what type of training it includes. Basically, what the topics are for that training.
Okay, I think we're good.
And if you are using the new Litmos platform, just be certain that not be certain, but just understand that the emails that come from the system are from the system at litmos.com. So those aren't any phishing campaigns, but if you do have any questions about it, you can always reach back out to us and we'll let you know for sure.
What's the cost to providers to use SANS?
There's no cost to the providers. DDSN is footing the bill on that, so there's no cost to you. So if you ever want to use it, we ask that you contact us. We'll get you set up initially, then give you the admin guide to provide you with the details on how to add new users. Next topic is encryption. Many of you guys, well, I think most of you guys will be using TheraP, and the best way to send any encrypted email outside of your network is to send it through SCOM, which is in TheraP. If you have any doubts on if your message includes any PII, it would just be safe to send it through SCOM regardless. One thing we have noticed in the past is that there may be some emails that are too large to go through SCOM. And if that is the case, the person that you're communicating with, say you have to send Chris something, you'll reach out to Chris and ask him to send you a secure email, which would be an encrypted email, and you can respond to that email and the traffic will be encrypted throughout the whole life cycle. Or if you have your own encrypted email system within your provider, you can use that as well, as long as you are ensuring that that traffic is encrypted between you and anyone outside your internal network. And this last slide is just something for you guys to have as tips to have on your desk or wherever you want to keep it, just to give you some ideas of what you can do to keep your workplace safe as well as your home network. So this information is both good for work and at home, and I think it's good that you heed to some of these best practices. It'll be best for you as well as ensuring that our data is safe and secure when you're using it. And that is the last thing we have for information security. Are there any other questions?
Nope, looks like we're good.
All right.
Start.
Well, next up we have IT coming to the board.
Thank you, Kareem.
What is it?
That might be out of order, Mike. That's the SPM.
Yeah, see where I'm going down. All right. In the right place?
Might have got them out of order when I combined them in.
You.
There you go.
Yeah, Just trying to figure out where I'm at in here. Okay.
Wow. Hold on, guys. I know you're getting whiplash here.
Hi, guys. My name is Michael Mickey. I'm the IT Director, Chief Information Officer here at DDSN. And I have myself and my IT manager, Ken Parks, here. We work closely with the security team, the CISO, to ensure, number one, as Kareem mentioned, to secure our data. And IT provides a platform vehicle for you guys to access the data by way of the help desk. There are a lot of things that most of our responsibility is DDSN central office and its employees, but we do extend our services to the provider community. And our help desk is here from Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30. You can call us or you can submit an email at helpdesk@ddsn.sc.gov. We do offer critical support, after-hour support, primarily with TheraP and access to some of our reports and our portals and things like that. So if there's an issue after hours and requires some assistance, don't hesitate to call us. And that's mainly for critical issues. There's probably no one here to answer questions, but if it's an issue that affects one or more people or providers, we'll definitely respond. TheraP access, security for TheraP is controlled by your TheraP security administrators during the onboarding process. And he or she has access to provide the necessary security to your new employees. TheraP training, although we have some guides available, new users are accommodated through the provider. If for any reason you guys need additional training or information, we provide that additional training or help that can answer questions about navigating the system. I do have a link here as well that provides some direct TheraP support, and maybe I shouldn't open this. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't. It takes you through the user guide and different aspects of the system that you can click on and help you understand how to navigate through the system. Very detailed in solving some of the challenges some of our users have. Let me get back to that PDF exchange.
Oh, you're a trip, man. Mike's messing up my computer.
Right. IT
There
guy.
you
In addition to that link, we have the portal right now. Most of you guys get in to access some of our ResLog data, SPM, RTD2, Actuate reporting. Most of that information is in our portal. We're going to be transitioning off of that portal in the very near future to another
Platform.
This thing just jumped.
Let me drive.
How'd you go to a PDF exchange? Keep it in PowerPoint.
It is a PowerPoint. You never sent me a PowerPoint. All right.
Apologize, guys.
All right. What are we trying to look at?
Right there. So inside the portal, as you'll see, it's coming up here in a second. There's our business tools, SPM, RTD2, JEDI, where we maintain user access to the portal. So if there's a user request, we'll use JEDI to access, to submit that request, and then the process of creating that new user, deleting that user, changing security or whatever, begins in IT. Another thing we have is our DDSN website, which we'll be going through a transition here at some point in next year. It's located at ddsn.sc.gov. There's a lot of information out there as well as far as finance audit resources, the directives, executive memos, standards, and manuals, and also provider rates. Security and access, new user requests. As I mentioned, JEDI is the vehicle for requesting new users. You submit a request, your provider security administrator will get it in a JEDI system. that security administrator will submit all the necessary IT paperwork to IT, and we'll begin the process. Very important step in security and access is terminating a user, just to make sure that that access goes away once that employee is no longer with the provider. It's extremely important to let us know. It is strictly prohibited, this goes without saying, to share account information among staff members, as it violates the agency policies. So you can't use a single login for multiple people, in short. SPM, make sure you're listed, your key staffs are listed in the service provider management system and are in the proper categories to ensure receipt of communications relevant to them. One of the things that we're dealing with now is cleaning SPM up and making sure it's accurate. As we change or upgrade the system, or there's new regulatory changes, or there's information about outages and things like that, we want to be able to communicate with you guys. And the only way we can do that is have the key contact information. So it's important that that information is updated. And if you're primary, ensure that there's some other staff members to facilitate getting that information in your absence. That is all I have for us IT, and I'm going to be turning it over to our procurement manager, Ms. Candace Ghosted.
You want me to drive or you want to drive? All right, go for it. Jump in the driver's seat.
I got this.
You want to show Mike how it's done?
She'll mess it up.
Do.
I'll give her a minute. I'll give her a minute.
Good morning. Yeah, good morning. My name is Candace Golson. I'm the procurement director here for DDSN. My contact information is on the front of this presentation. Is it down arrow or enter? Is it down?
There's a arrow right there.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Here's the procurement organization chart. You are aware of our CFO, Chris Clark, myself as the director. We have 2 procurement specialists, Terry, Maple, Ronnie, Jefferson, and James is a supply specialist here at DDSN. The procurement regulations, you have the Directive 250-08-DD. Is the procurement director for the local DSN boards and contracted service providers. Assistance available to providers by contacting the procurement staff, which is myself. Anyone on my team, it's a fairly new team, so we're training. If they're not able to provide the answers that you're looking for, they know to reach out to myself so we can get you what you need. Directive is available on the website. Each provider must adapt their own procurement policy based upon the DDSN directive. The policy that your organization set must be more restrictive but not less restrictive than what the directive states. And we do recommend that you have your own procurement policy. That will be, to your organization's standards. Audit requirements. Your external auditor is required to test compliance with the procurement directive. They will also need to report those findings to the DDSN audit team and to us. You will also have to do a corrective action plan in the required findings, on the required findings. Code of conduct and conflict of interest or conflicts. Providers must establish and implement a written code of conduct. Conflict of interest awareness is in fact or appearance. No employees or board members may solicit or receive personal
Gratuities.
gratuities, favors, or any other monetary values from contractors or suppliers. So, this is a big one. This happens at mostly during the holiday time, when you do business with a vendor and they want to give you a ham or send a ham. We see it all the time here at state government. We always either reject it or, that's the best practice. Some just they put it in an open area where everybody could utilize it, but you just don't want to show any preferences to a particular vendor. And that can also include like lunch. If they want to do a meeting in your board, in the office. Don't never do a meeting in a restaurant, or even if it's just having coffee. Even if you're paying your own bill, it's just about, what it looks like. So you just don't want to do that. State ethics code governs DDSN boards. Can be used by contract service providers as a guide. Signing a conflict of interest statement required by key employees and board members. So here we just say key employees is for you to determine who those key employees are. Like I, myself, as a procurement director, will be a key employee. Your executive director, those people in those prominent positions would be considered as key employees. Purchase levels. $10,000 or less is considered to be little or no competition required. We use the term as price is fair, reasonable. This doesn't mean that you cannot seek quotes or do your market research to see what the price market is out there. I actually highly recommend that. At least get one quote so you can use that as historical data moving forward. Also, you have $10,000 and $1 to $25,000 where it requires you to get 3 written quotes. The next threshold is $25,000 to $100,000, which is a solicitation, form of solicitation. And when you do that, you if you get one bid back, then there's no minimal amount of bids. So one would be, okay to have, and then you have $100,000 or higher is an invitation for bid, which the bid amount applies as well. And we'll go into more details in regard to those thresholds later on in the presentation. Purchase definitions. So these are just examples of how to apply those thresholds. And when to determine which method is the best sourcing method. So if you purchase 250 boxes of gloves at $50 per box, your total purchase is $12,500. So in that case, you cannot use the lesser small purchase threshold. You would have to go to the 3 written quotes. In the event that you can't get the 3 written quotes, then you can advertise in Skibo. And if you just get back 1, then you've done your due diligence as far as seeking as much competition as possible. So hiring a contractor to paint 4 houses at the cost of $6,500 per home. Your total purchase is $26,000. So you would take that as a whole. So that threshold would be also it would be a form of solicitation, so you would have to solicit for that. So you can't do the 3 written quotes. Purchasing 40 computers at $1,000 each. So even though the computers may be considered as a small purchase, you're going to take the quantity and you look at the procurement as a whole and determine how much you're actually going to spend for the entire purchase. So you can't just base it upon the unit price, and that's just what these examples are really stating here. So in this case, your total, amount of purchase will be $40,000. So again, a solicitation would be the best sourcing method for this particular items. What's another good one? even with hiring like the lawn care. So you have 15 yards at $1,500 per month for 3 years. So we also looking at the total potential contract value for the whole entire 3 years. So it will be the 1,500 times the 12 months and then the number of years, which will give you $54,000. So, you know, just take those things in mind. You know, people tend to look at what's now, not the whole spectrum of the procurement. So this is easily, you know, picked up on audit findings. So just be aware. Splitting purchases. Procurement requirements must not be artificially divided to can't even speak today. Constitute a small purchase or avoid getting competition. So splitting purchases happens. It can happen a lot. So you don't want to circumvent the process as far as, okay, well, we have, and it happens, or it can happen more so on P cards than purchase orders. So I use a P card example. You know, your purchasing limit.
They don't have P cards.
Okay. Well, okay. Well, I'll use.
Talk about if they have like a Visa card, if they have like an agency Visa card.
Okay.
Or a Walmart purchase or.
Okay. So your credit card limit is, your single transaction limit is, you know, $2,500, but you're buying something that's over your threshold. So you can't say, well, I'm going to take my P card and then maybe have a staff member put the rest on their card by paying the difference to make sure that to get what you need. So you can't split purchases. You can't have two forms of payment. It's the combined total. So in the event that you make a purchase and it's over your threshold, then P card is not the appropriate form of payment. It would be a purchase order or whatever other form of payment you would have to use. You just can't go over your threshold and circumvent the process to make it fit to get what you need. So that's why it's always good to get a quote so you can determine how much things are going to be. And then that way you determine what source and method you would need to use. So just getting stuff in advance and getting quotes will always, you know, help you with these circumstances. Purchases that are exempt. Directive provides for certain exemptions listed in Appendix A. Use of state contract vendors. You all are able to use our, you know, state contract vendors. Professional service, legal, auditing, medical and dental, psychology, therapists, real estate agents. All of those are considered exempt services. However, I feel as if just because they're exempt and you don't have to seek competition, it's always to get a good general idea of getting quotes for these services. That way you know that the prices that you're getting are reasonable or within market. So you could also, you know, use those as get quotes for exemption or solicit for exemption.
Candace, Laura has a couple of questions. Did you want them now or towards the end?
Who is it?
Laura. She has a couple of questions.
Okay, we can go ahead and take those.
Her first question is, how does this apply to employee benefits? Our health insurance for employees is a large purchase, but we are not bidding this every year as that affects the pricing we get.
So I'll field this one. If it's not listed as an exemption, which I don't think it is, I don't have the exemptions memorized, but if it's not specifically listed in Appendix A, then it applies to the purchase and the vendor selection. The issue would be at the outset to ensure that you follow those requirements. And as you enter into a new renewal period, and this is where Candace can comment on this part of it, You can't be switching health insurance companies annually. That's just not efficient. It's not even viable. And plus, there's only so many choices anyways in the state of South Carolina. So in my personal opinion, the initial purchase, when you enter into that agreement with that company, is where you need to comply with procurement rules. And then on an annual basis, if you feel that the pricing becomes an issue, then a best practice at that point would be to seek additional quotations. That's how I would approach that.
Correct. And even, I agree with you. And even with you renewing, you should have some type of some type of language in the contract or the agreement where, you know, it automatically renews and you have a certain amount of days to either audit them or be able to terminate that agreement. So you could, you know, review those, ask them, well, if, you know, check the price, check the market. If you feel like the price is not fair, you can check the market and see if there's a lesser price or whatever case may be. You can always negotiate. For me, you know, from that, it's before you renew into a new renewal period. So if you feel it's not reasonable and they're increasing prices, I would just check the market and just, before you go into a new year, see competition again.
Okay, she just commented that you just said medical is an exemption. Would that not apply to employee health insurance? And then, of course, we have a review of our benefits, but we just cannot go to bid every year. I think Chris and I are on the same page.
Yeah, this is not a medical service. A medical service is the actual provider of the service, whether it be a doctor, dentist, you know, whatever the different ones
So
are.
like even,
Astro and
yeah, just hiring like a medical physician for, you know, for a consumer or whatever, those are exempt services. So that's how I would read it, or dental services for our consumers, you know, those are exempt services. So that's how I would take it.
yeah.
And her other question is, and what about buying equipment or property? We base home purchases on what home specs are best for our individuals, not on the cheapest cost.
Yeah, that's a
That would be a RP.
yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think real estate, if it's not an exemption, needs to be one, because you have to meet certain criteria when it comes to houses, and everybody's out there shopping at different houses. I mean, I would document that you hired this broker and you looked at, you know, these 15 houses and how you landed on the one that you you're going to buy. And I mean, the real issue I have is there some party on the outside that is related somewhere that is benefiting from purchase of this particular property. You know, let's say it's a board member's relative or something, or the finance director's sister's house or whatever. You know, in the end, the intent is to show fair competition, that you looked at all the options available, and that you document that you did due diligence when it came to things like this. So real estate, the real estate broker is an exemption, right? It says real estate. Is that actual the real estate itself, or is that the broker?
It says the agent.
Right, the agent. So that's a great question, and I don't think there's an auditor out there that would write you up for buying a house that didn't go through a procurement process. I just don't think that's appropriate. Now, if you're constructing a house, that's totally different. If you're going to actually build, yes, you're going to have to go through the whole construction and bid process on that. But buying an already existing home that's not it's not from the ground up that you're creating, that I think you're going to be okay, as long as you can document nothing hokey went on.
And even if with that, I would even say you should have some type of criteria at the beginning of what you're looking for, so you could show what you're evaluating when you're making your determination as to this is the home that we have to purchase or whatever. So just evaluating what was given to you as far as your responses. If a broker comes back to you and say, well, we have this house, showing that you have guidelines beforehand will help you determine or justify why you chose that. So even like an evaluation criteria or some type of criteria of what your specs are or what they need to be. Is that it?
Yeah, I think she just made a comment referencing to something Chris said about this is a conflict of interest issue. We will take the recommendation and just document our due diligence.
Right. I mean, if I'm auditing you and I see you did something and I'm looking through the procurement, through the closing documents and the file related to this purchase, and I see something that looks suspicious. I know your board member's last name is X, and somehow I pick up on the fact that it looks like there's a related party issue. That would be the only time I would really pursue that from an audit standpoint. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be running behind, so.
Those
are good. That's good questions. I made a note to myself that when we revised that directive, because it actually does need to be revised, we revised it when we had no commission, and we wanted to put those new purchase limits out so that we could relax those so y'all didn't have to bid so much stuff. But actually that directive needs an entire rewrite, and I'll make a note that we address that real estate question.
And I also find out there were new exemptions on the state website, so we probably need to look at those too to see how those need to apply. Sole sources, products or services available for any one source. Source is the sole manufacturer, sole provider, and distributor. Requires a written justification to maintain in the files. If over $50,000, an attendant sole source must be posted in SCIBO for 5 business days before awarding the contract. If over $250,000, an attendant sole source must be posted in SCIBO for 10 business days before awarding the contract. So sole sources, I feel like you should do market research, see what's out there to determine whether or not it's in fact a sole source. You can also see if there's any other competitors out there or whatever. Ask them for who are your competitors. If they list other people, sometimes they don't, or ask for a letter stating why they are considered a sole source is always a good method as well. Emergency procurements. An emergency exists if a condition is present that creates a threat to consumer health, welfare, and safety. Competition should be sought to the extent possible given the situation. Only what is needed at the time of the emergency. Emergencies require a declaration of advance of purchase. Written justification is required to maintain in file, and also the notice of must be posted in SCIBO for emergencies $50,000 or more as soon as practical after the purchase. So with an emergency, so say for instance, if the roof has a leak, the emergency is to stop the leak and whatever it takes to stop that leak, not to replace the whole roof. In healthcare services, I've determined that emergency can be defined differently in certain situations. So just be mindful it's what is going to resolve the true emergency at that given time, not just to replace the whole or purchase the whole thing is applied to. So a roof is a good example.
So the example there, just to elaborate, you would do the emergency procurement to stop the leak, and then you may say, okay, we need to get this roof replaced. Then you would go out and find all your required bids for that particular purchase.
Correct.
It's not that you can't do the roof replacement. It's just you have to segregate.
The emergency is not to replace the whole roof. It's to stop the leak. So if you decide that, well, we need to replace the roof, then you just seek competition for the roof replacement, not just, for the leak. Because, of course, the prices are very different. The leak probably wouldn't cost you, is not going to cost you as much as a whole roof replacement. So that's my view on that. Awarding a purchase contract. Just make sure when you're making awards that when you evaluate your quotes that they're apples to apples and they're not vastly different. The good rule of thumb is when you do seek competition, make sure that your scope is the same. Having a written scope versus a verbal scope where you're not changing verbally anything, it's written and it's passed from vendor to vendor to make sure that you are getting back the same type of quotes in the same manner that you're asking for. So just making sure that you're evaluating and getting apples to apples. Not required to award to the lowest price. Basically, you can also go back on past performance if you're not going to go award to the lowest price. If the lowest price is too low and you search the market and you question if they're capable of understanding the scope, you could go back to the vendor and say, hey, I don't think you understand. We deem you not responsive or responsible or whatever the case may be, because the other prices that we got is vastly different. So just making sure they understand what you're asking for. And like I said, award to the lowest responsive and responsive bidder. You could consider the past performances, the capabilities, the capacity, and if you need to, depending on the complexity of what you're asking for, make sure you have the insurance, the bonds, and the licenses. So that goes back to responsibility. Just making sure that that vendor is secured. Small purchases under $10,000. Like I said before, these are considered prices fair and reasonable. You want to make sure that you're sharing equitably among qualified suppliers. So, for janitorial supplies, you got tons of vendors that can provide those. Just make sure that you're not going back to the same person for repeat orders over and over again. You can get a couple of vendors that you're rotating to buying supplies, making sure that you're sharing equitably across the market. We only got a few more minutes, so just if I'm missing something or you have any questions, just reach back out to me. But it's basically self-explanatory. These limits were increased last year before last, 2019. So basically, under $10,000, no competition is required. Small purchases, $10,000 to $25,000. You must obtain 3 written quotes. And you have to make sure that they're bona fide quotes, meaning no bids are considered a quote or is not counted. In the event that you only receive 1 bid or 2 bids, you must advertise in Skibo, and it says adequate days. I would say 5 business days is more than adequate before you award your to the vendor. The purchase is $25,000 to $100,000. Those have to be advertised in Skibo, and you have to advertise long enough to increase competition. No minimum bids amount is required, so if you get 1 bid, that's fine. And you just have to maintain evidence that you advertise in Skibo. Anytime you advertise in Skibo, I would just make sure that you maintain documentation regardless. For auditing purposes, because they'll ask for it.
Okay, Ms. Laura has another question.
Can we try and get through the materials first?
And you can
see if we have time for questions, because we're way behind right now.
Okay.
I feel bad for Candace because she's having to rush through it now.
Yeah, that's okay. Purchase over $100,000 is an invitation for bid or RFP. Whatever source and method is appropriate for what you're buying for. Preferences do apply. Actually start at $10,000. This is considered as a sealed bid process, meaning you should not know how many bids you have and who's bidding on it. So, they should those should be kept locked in a bid box or something. You should have a bid tabulation, and these awards must be the results must be posted. I guess on your website. We use the state procurement website to publish our awards. So that's about it. Protest applies for $50,000 or more. You should have your protest language and your protest rights, or who the vendor is supposed to report the protest to, and just have that process already out there so the bidder know how to report protests and how the whole process of protests and how they'll be handled.
Should be part of your procurement policy.
Correct. Any questions?
All right, so now I just want to make sure, I couldn't remember how many more slides you had.
Okay.
All right, Angela, what was her question?
Sorry, I was talking on mute. I said, if we have purchase agreements for lower prices with Staples, we do not want to rotate vendors as we are getting a negotiated discount for supplies. I assume since under 10K per purchase, we do not have to worry about this, correct?
Well,
Staples.
Staples is on a state contract, so really you don't have to rotate. That applies for non-contracted items. So if you have contracts established, you've already sought competition, you do not have to share equitably. However, for non-contracted items, you must.
Yeah, so some examples of what we've dealt with here is we've got one regional center that calls Roto-Rooter every time they have a plumbing problem, and we have to spread that around. There's literally 100 plumbers in that area. So that's an example. But if you're using a state contract vendor like Staples, it doesn't, no procurement requirements that we just went over apply. All that's been done by the state.
The small
Same with copiers. If you get a state copier, you get a state cell phone plan, you get a state.
Those things are contracted items. That does not apply for contracts. So anything that's non-contractual, contracted items, it falls under the small dollar threshold.
Laura had great questions.
If you have any more questions and something
She might be the only one attending. I don't know.
just reach out to me. You can also go to the procurement website. That's helpful. And the last slide is a small purchase procedure. It just gives you a rundown of some of the things that we talked about and the thresholds when they're competition, when it has to be advertised in Skibo, and what kind of quotations you need. So that's about it. But if you have any questions.
That's a very handy little thing to print out and keep with you. It's kind of like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, it's helpful. I refer to it all the time. So
if you have more questions, contact Candace. Didn't you put your email address in there?
It's on the first slide and my telephone number.
She had another comment.
Okay.
And she said, what about repair contractors who also gives us discounts on regular basis? I'm required to spread this out with someone who does not necessarily respect our individuals when they visit our locations?
You should, again, I'll let Candace comment. The reason I keep stepping on Candace's toes is because she's not in the provider world as much, and so I'm trying to help her out. I'm not trying to make the rules here. The issue I would look at, Laura, is, if that was Laura again, is should you solicit and just put out to bid that you need a repair person, go through the whole bid process, and then you would select a vendor, and then that would fall under the contractual arrangement at that point for the period of the contract, right?
Yes. And if they're in default, then you have grounds to terminate the contract. So yes, I would just establish a contract to make sure that you see the whole goal is make sure you see competition as a whole. In the event that that contract is not able to be considerate of the consumers that you do or
Yeah.
care for or whatever. If they're in default, then you have grounds to terminate.
And if you do your solicitation properly, you can create preferences and different scoring criteria to ensure that it doesn't come down just to price. So you could, put in your solicitation certain language related to their ability to ensure that your consumers' livelihoods and their life is not disrupted by their work. So
just set the qualifications high. I mean, you don't want to be so restrictive where you're singling out one particular
it's like, wait a minute.
contractor, but just state things that you need and understanding. Good thing is to have a pre-bid conference, pre-performance conference with the selected contractor before they start repairs at your facility. So those are things that you can do to kind of reduce that. But if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I could talk about it all day.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Candace.
Thank you.
Deborah Leopard, I gave you control. I don't know if you can see the little arrow at the bottom that I got the cursor on, but you can advance the page there, or use a little arrow up and use a little hand to move the page accordingly.
Okay, I can see it, I think, barely.
You got a lot of slides, so I don't want to not be able to keep up with you.
First of all, hello everybody. This is Deborah Leopard, Contracts Director. And I see we're a little bit behind, but a lot of what I have to talk about is well illustrated with backups. So I think a lot of it's pretty self-explanatory. The first slide talks a little bit about just the contracts in general, and this is referencing the DSN board contracts. But everybody's contracts, the qualified providers and the DSN board contracts run the same period, July 1 through June 30th. That's our fiscal year. And the original contract for everybody is based on May 1 data. We have to get everybody paid by July 1st, so we can't wait till July 1st to download all the data. So you'll get your first contract of the year may have some older data on it, but we get that all cleaned up and trued up on July 1, which is our Amendment 1 for the DSN boards. And for the qualified providers, I do the same thing. I go back and make sure all your July 1 people are in there and updated. For DSN boards, for your capitated Amendment 1, you will get a listing of all your consumers. You'll get a residential report and various schedules that tie everything together. And the subsequent amendments are issued, and they amend that capitated Amendment 1. So your original contract is just to get you paid, and then the capitated Amendment 1 is the document that you will save and you will look at as we go through the rest of the year. There's lots of backup documentation, and I highly encourage everybody to hang on to all that, because that is just something that you can use all through the year. You can kind of see what's going on with your who came and who went and how you started and all that stuff. The band B's and I's have been removed from the capitated contract, but they will still show up on the appendix for this fiscal year because you do have a little bit of funding still there. And then after this fiscal year, once we get into 22, that's all going to go away. You won't see any references to B's or I's or at-home day slots. Because we've just done this change fairly recently, in this packet you also have your Band B and I packet that shows how that was handled. I'm not going to go over all that again today, but it is in there if you want to go back and look at it and see how we calculated that, and there's a lot of good examples in there too. All of the amendments, whether it's Q or DSN board, they are based on actual dates, move-in and move-out dates in CDSS. I also approve the ADT, so once they're approved, that approved ADT is what you can use until you get your amendment to show what rate was approved, what band rate was approved. Then for boards, it might take about a month for me to get an amendment out if it once the person actually shows up as moving in CDSS. The amendments are never based on the proposed date or the earliest possible date that's listed on your ADT. They're always based on actual dates. Vacancies are funded for all providers for 30 days after discharge. We're doing 60 days during the COVID period. That's still in effect. If you have an outlier or enhanced staffing, that is terminated immediately. And you would get, like, if it was a high needs, you would just get the high needs rate for that vacancy period. You're not going to get the outlier continuing on for 60 days. The funding ban is paid for 30 days or 60 during COVID if the bed is not filled. That can get a little confusing because of many times, as you all know, that vacancy can move around. It might start at an ICF, and then you move an existing consumer into the ICF from a CTH2, and then move a consumer from an SLP into the CTH2. So the vacancy, that 30-day period begins the date of the first consumer moves out, and you don't get another 60 days every time somebody transfers. So kind of look at it like it starts when the consumer leaves, and when a new consumer comes in off the critical list or a transfer from another provider, that's when the vacancy closes. I have some good examples in here of different types of vacancies. If you had a bed that was, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ms. Laura had a question. I believe it's related to what you were just discussing. Did you want to do that later or now?
She had a question?
Yeah, she said, when does the Schedule K for COVID time period expire? Is DDSN anticipating renewing that with CMS?
That's a Chris question.
The additional 30 days we're given has nothing to do with Appendix K. It's out of our FMAP that folks keep questioning how we're using it. So we will discontinue that additional 30 days when we feel that the folks at the center of this decision is families' reluctance to do visits and move their loved ones around at this time. And so as long as we feel that that's kind of the temperature out there, we will keep that 30 days going. Currently, the way I've looked at it is I'm tying it to the public health emergency decision that the feds are doing, which is through June 30 right now. So right now, unless Pat or Mary tell me otherwise, my intention is to keep that funded through the fiscal year. And then if they call off the public health emergency at the federal level, then we would discontinue funding that additional time.
Okay, hopefully that answers it. Anytime you have any kind of question about a specific amendment, an ADT, a funding ban, a funding level, vacancy terminations, you can email me at the contracts email or call me. Sometimes it can get a little confusing, and I'm always happy to walk you through it. Usually when we talk through it, it makes a lot more sense. So I have attached, this is just a list of all the different types of contracts that you may have. Some providers have a number of different types of contracts. There are quite a few. At the beginning of the year, you may get 6 or 7 different contracts. All of these are now coming to you electronically, which is saving a ton of time for everybody. They'll come through the DocuSign, and all your backup will be attached in the DocuSign. Once you sign it, it comes right back to me, and Chris and I sign it really quickly, and you'll get your fully executed contract within a couple days. Take that contract and download it when you get it, just so that you have a copy, because they do expire in DocuSign. I think you have a month or two, but don't. I would just go ahead and print it out and save it as soon as you get it back. This is a summary of the capitated amendment process. I've changed that this fiscal year. I think it's working out really well. Anytime that you get an amendment to your capitated contract, you will get a spreadsheet That is an appendix that shows from and to amounts and the changes. It also includes a small funding band table for your reference, and the amount on that cover sheet will match the total at the bottom of the change column will match what's on your payment schedule. You'll also get a summary that shows all my calculations, the dates, the names, the slots. You should be able to follow the example. I divide everything by days, not months, so that's confusing sometimes. You just take the days, the amount of the band amount, and you divide it, and you come up with the total number that we're either taking or giving back to you based on the date the consumer's coming in or out. So you get some good backup with each amendment. Here's our DocuSign instructions, and it's really simple. Most of you have probably already been out there and looked at this, but this is an instruction that just takes you through the process. Once you click finish, that document comes right back to us, and then we will get it back to you really quickly. There is a self-help video, but I haven't had questions about DocuSign in quite some time. I think everybody's getting used to it, and it's working really well. This is an example of what the appendix looks like. The stuff highlighted in yellow is all the things that's going away in fiscal 2022. But you see what number you started out with in 3, what you wound up with in 4, and the difference, the amount of money that's changing is that $4,097, and it explains where it's coming from and the dates, and just a brief summary of what's happening there. You'll see anything that changes, band consumer numbers, outliers, slot changes, anything like that is going to appear on this appendix. And like I said, it's pretty self-explanatory. Here's your little funding band. That's got the new band rates on it, and like I said, the B and I will disappear next year. That was the rates we left off. If you are a DSN board, you'll be getting one more B and I kind of true up through December 31st. That'll be coming out probably by the end of this week. I think this shows your slots and any changes you have in slots. And this is the amendment summary that shows what happened, the moves. Some of these can be very complex and have multiple ins and outs. So if it gets confusing, just let me know. You may have a vacancy when somebody moved out and somebody moved into the bed within a 20-day period. If that's the case, unless there was a change in the funding level, you're not going to see an amendment for that. People have asked me about that. Why didn't I see amendment for Johnny? Well, he took a bed that was already funded, so there's no need for an amendment. These are some good samples of different types of vacancies that may happen. And, just you can look over these and see, and it says in the case of the Enterprise SLP2, somebody moved in within 14 days, so there's no loss of funding and there's no amendment. So that's an example of where you wouldn't see an amendment. And if somebody moves in, let's say they move in 65 days, then you're only going to lose the funding for 5 days. So it's trying to keep it where the amendment, instead of taking the whole amount and then doing another amendment to give the whole amount, I try to do them so I can, if possible, take it and just take that little time period that the vacancy was actually there. Some beds, of course, aren't filled maybe till the next fiscal year, so you might see the loss of the whole bed that time. Here's more examples, and I think you can look over these on your own and just it might help explain some of the different things that can go on with consumers moving around. This is an example of the QPL appendix. What you'll get if you're qualified providers, you'll get your list of consumers, and the dates, they'll stay on your appendix all fiscal year, even if they terminate during the year. And if they terminate, they'll fall off the next fiscal year, and you'll see how many days they're approved for, the leave days based on their admission, and their approved rate. You'll get these maybe I'll try to do maybe 5 or 6 updates during the year. If you don't see a consumer on there, you can go by your ADT, and the consumer will show up. And if you still don't see them, just give me a call and say, hey, I don't see somebody on there that should be on there, and I'll look into it and see what's going on. And then the next section is just examples of ADTs, what they look like. The residential provider gets copies of these, and you can use this. You see, it was approved at Band G because he transferred into CTH2. So that's kind of like your something you can hang on to until you get that amendment, seeing the funding level that was approved and that the transfer was approved. I think that the rest of this stuff in here, that's just different examples of what ADTs look like. You should be pretty familiar with these. That's admission, discharge, transfers. And this is the rest of this stuff is your B&I fee for service, and then the band increase examples. So there's just some good information in here if you want to look through this and see what we did. On those amendments, I think it might be helpful for you to hang on to. That was the very condensed version of contracts. So I know we're tight on time. Were there any other questions?
I'll just make one comment. The videos are out there on our finance and audit page related to the in-depth discussion in regards to this stuff. There's one for DSN boards and one for private providers. So please check that out if you need more information on what Deborah just went over.
We didn't have any more questions right now.
Did you have any comment on the payment schedules at all? There's an example payment schedule in here, Deborah. Is there anything to say here?
Now the way that I'm doing these amendments now, you're going to get a little attachment that shows where the money's going to line up on these payment schedules. For the B&I change, a lot of your funding fell under the adult day column, not the B&I, the band increase change fell under the adult day column. But you see how the capitated is broken out here in different sections, and that was confusing for people. That's why I've started kind of giving you an explanation of where you're going to see that on your payment schedule. Sometimes it's broke, if it's a small amount, you'll see like a lump sum, but usually it's spread out all through the rest of the fiscal year based on the date that it's effective. And you can follow from the original all the way through Amendment 4 on this particular example. And ultimately, when you get your summary at the end of the year, this total capitated services should tie back to your total capitated contract. And you should be able to follow all these amendments. The bed fees and client fees, if you have those do not tie into your total capitated. Those are separate, so that can be confusing sometimes. That's the breakout of how the payments are broken out for the B&I change. It shows you, the last payment's always slightly different because we have to tie it all together, but this shows how it's divided out. There was a catch-up payment and then spread through the rest of the year. There's your band report that you can run to see all your band consumers using your financial manager number. And that'll show you everybody. The B's and I's are listed, so you know who's approved for services. Even though they're not on your contract, it's still, you can still pull it so you can see who is authorized for services. And then this is the band increase amendment. Which was for, this is the capitated, for the QPLs, you guys just got a revised appendix with all the new rates, and that's already gone out, and most of you have already signed that, so everybody should have this amendment. Most of them have been signed at this point. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, I think we've covered it all at this. Even, these are the rates.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we put these on the web yet or not, but we're in the process of adding these.
IT's working on it, I think.
I will note the state-funded community supports cap went up by $488, and we have updated the calculator that you all use, the Excel file with the updated rates, and that is also on our finance and audit page, or it should be. I know Debbie Wilson asked that it be updated, I think Friday or something, maybe that email went out, or Monday, I can't remember. It all runs together. But anyways, the calculator's been updated. Same with the state-funded follow along. We didn't adjust that cap because it's support employment only. And basically between the increases and the decreases, we felt that the cap was where it needed to be in regards to passing through the employment individual Medicaid rate. All right. Any questions for Deborah Leopard? Angela, you got any?
No other questions.
Okie dokie. Well, Deborah, I appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right. And Diane was unable to be here today. So you guys will have to listen to me when it comes to room and board. So basically, to wrap this up, every agency that runs non-ICF residential programs and charge a fee for room and board charges has to go through an approval process with DDSN. So examples of that obviously are CRCFs, CTH2s, some SLPs might have room and board charges because maybe the provider built their own apartments and they're not HUD funded, or if they are HUD funded, maybe there's some charges that are being incurred that you need to recover. We added to the directive, the audit directives this past year, that we wanted this calculation in the audit report. I guess all in all, the implementation was fairly successful. We do have a good many issues with what got turned in or didn't get turned in to us, but it was a significant change, and I'm hoping year 2 we'll get a lot more accurate information, and we need to do an actual training on room and board alone, because it's a fairly complex area. So we're in the process of reviewing room and board right now for everyone. The room and board calculation is due to us in the audit reports for those of you that are calendar year or some other fiscal year besides June 30. There are some nuances that we have to work out in regards to how we get your calculations, because if we wait to get your calculation when your audit's turned in March, if you're a calendar year, either we need to approve that rate being implemented not on January 1, which is our general time frame. We expect rates to change January 1st. So anyways, this directive is going to be modified probably here in the next month or two. There'll be significant revisions to it, and at that point you guys can all comment. In fact, you can comment on it now if you would like to go out to our website. But essentially, room and board costs are not allowed to be charged to the waiver programs. So if you have a residential placement, whether it be HASKI or IDRD, we cannot have Medicaid pay for any of those room and board costs. So the way you recover those is through a room and board charge, and that is this process that 25009 DD covers. There's a lot of nuance to it, as well as if you have HUD projects versus non-HUD projects. A good bit of that we're going to be looking at, how we want to revise that as well. But anyways, I just wanted everybody to know that room and board is a process. You are required to charge folks on a sliding fee basis, considering their ability to pay. You, as a local agency, the directive currently says that you have to include 50%. Man, why do they always do a leaf blower when I'm trying to present? It is so distracting. I don't know if y'all can hear that or not. I can't even hardly concentrate. Um, you have to include 50% of their earned income, and allow them to retain at least $50. Boards can do, as usual with standards, you can always do more, not less. So if you wanted to allow your consumers to keep $200 a month, or you only want to count 10% of their earned income, all that's up to you. Or if you want to, you can't count 70% of their earned income towards what you can charge them, for example. And I think right here it says a minimum earned income, which is a little confusing. So this process is being managed by our cost analysis team. You might have been in contact with Diane, Andrea, or Matt. They're doing a phenomenal job of reviewing these for us this year as we work through some transitional issues, and we appreciate you working with us to get all those things addressed on your side. I think that's all I need to say about Room and Board, unless Debbie is on here.
Miss Laura has a comment.
Okay.
She says Social Security auditors want you to prove that you charge everyone in the home the same amount to make it to be what they can afford. We have to do a bad debt write-off.
I would like to talk to that Social Security representative and actually talk offline in regards to what you're saying, just to ensure that I understand. It is mandatory under Medicaid that it be a sliding fee scale, and you consider each consumer's ability to pay. So inherently, no, you don't charge people the same exact amount. That's crazy, and that's not at all what's in the regs. So that's going to be a situation where maybe you've got two different entities giving you opposite advice and regulations, and we would need to work through that. And as far as the bad debt write-off, we've met internally, and we need to issue some additional guidance to everyone in regards to how we recommend that Room and Board be recorded on your books, because I personally do not agree with the advice that was given here prior to me getting here, and we've discussed it internally, and we all agree now on the proper way to do this. So in our new Room and Board training we'll be rolling out here soon, we'll go over all that with everyone. But additionally, this directive needs a lot of work. It's like 2 pages. It needs to be about 10 pages probably. There are a ton of issues that aren't even broached in this directive. For example, if you have a market renter in a HUD home, if you have a respite placement, if you have someone go home for an extended period of time, you consider charging a Room and Board. There's just a whole host of issues that are not discussed in this. So were there any other questions, Angela?
She had another comment. She said, we agree, but you can take that up with Social Security. We work through this by just writing off the debt as otherwise. I cannot get a clean Social Security audit.
Yeah. Social Security is just like the IRS, depending on who you talk to, or DHEC surveyors or anybody else. It's like opinions vary by each person. I have found that in my years in the industry that you'll go into one county and their Social Security folks have rules and processes that are outside what any other county has. So this is an issue we'd have to take up individually with your Social Security office, not Social Security National. So you would need to forward contact information or any details you have for us to work through that. I can't just call Social Security at the federal level and resolve this. All right, what else?
No other comments.
All right, well, we're about 6 minutes past. I appreciate everybody attending today. Please let others know if you feel this would help them in their jobs, and we'll be talking to you soon. I appreciate all that you do out there. Thank you. Have a good weekend.